So I'd like to thank you all for attending, first of all. Pleased to see a good mixture of ladies and gentlemen. And in particular, I'd like to thank Richard Betts for hosting the panel today. And just to pick up on the words, his closing words as a white male over 50, I think one of the things that we will be discussing today is that it's never too late to change certain things. So I'm very pleased to have as my guests today Cornelia Eisenbacher, Anna Bailly, Tina Paillet and Dr. Andreas Muschter, who have kindly agreed to sit on the panel, discuss with us. And one of the questions that we are asked is, why is RICS interested in this topic? RICS, those who know you, we are a professional body. We are a global body. We have over 150,000 members across the world. And as part of our commitment to the public, we are very interested in corporate social responsibility and how we can embed that into the markets. Diversity and achieving gender parity is one of the elements that belongs to a professional way of working and also ensuring that the markets are equipped with the best talents. 4 years ago, RICS did a comprehensive research called RICS Futures. Let's be ready. And this research was based on 12 months of discussions, panel discussions, to understand what are the topics that the market was most interested in. And from these, 6 elements emerged, things like sustainability, leadership, smart cities. But one of the core elements was also the war for talent. How can the real estate sector that is conservative, which is known to be male-dominated and which may not particularly enjoy the best reputation for different reasons, how can this sector attract more females to the profession? Because unless the sector does, then we run a huge risk of losing female talent. Females will turn their back on the sector and will go into other sectors, and there we will risk all the skills and attributes that females can add to the sector. So this is what we're going to be focusing on, because we also, in part of our discussions around Germany, we have established that gender parity, the pay gap, flexible working, these are all areas where we seem to do a lot of talk, but there are not enough solutions to make it happen. So walk the talk, making gender a reality, and thank you to my panel, who I would like to ask to briefly introduce themselves.
Yes. I start?
Yes, with yourself.
So I started my career as banker in 1983 at Deutsche Bank in Ravensburg in Baden-Württemberg. With the fall of the wall, I went to Potsdam in 1991 and 6 years later to Berlin. And I spent more than 3 decades at Deutsche Bank and Commerz Bank, and especially at last as Deputy Relationship Manager of the former Euro-Hypo. And since the beginning of this year, I have been started my own business. I've started my own company named Sales Finance Partners, a real estate financing agency. And besides job, business and private life, I'm very much engaged in my voluntary work at the community Frauen in the Immobilien-Wirtschaft since 2011 as member of the board and since last year as chairwoman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anna?
Yes, my name is Anna Reilly. I also started my own company almost 3 years ago now. I am an asset manager. I have an asset management company that I run in Hamburg, and previously I was in asset management with Savills Investment Management, also in Hamburg. I'm also, as of recent, the co-leader of the RICS regional group in Hamburg, which I do as a voluntary work.
Thank you, Anna. Tina?
Yes, thanks, Judith. So I am currently the chair of the RICS for the Europe region, so continental Europe. And I am also a real estate investor, developer, asset manager, jack of all trades. I've been working in the real estate business for probably over 25 years. I trained initially as an architect. I then went on to be an architect and a lighting designer, then went into real estate management after having gotten a degree in real estate from a French business school. And I would say that I'm really probably one of the few people that in all of their career had always turned around the same sort of field, and that's real estate, construction, property, and so that's my story.
Dr. Muschter.
Yeah, well, thanks for having the honor of being the only male on this panel. I'm a lawyer originally. I started to work for Commerz Bank, did M&A for the first period of my career, and I joined Commerz Real in December 2009, started as CFO in the company, took over the role as CEO in January 2013. We currently have 32 billion euros assets under management. We serve retail and institutional clients, and we invest basically all over the world, with a main focus obviously on Europe and Germany.
Thank you. So I'd like to start with my first question to the panel, which will be to Frau Eisenbacher. And it's very interesting because Frau Eisenbacher recently did an interview for the Vonovia magazine, and you stated that gender equality would be the norm in the next 20 years without having to talk about it specifically. So that so much work would have been done on raising the profile of women that actually this kind of conversation will not be happening anymore in 20 years because it would already have happened. So I'd like to ask you whether women are doing enough at this point in time to climb the career ladder. And should they be taking responsibility, their own responsibility, or what role could men play in helping them?
I think that we have a good starting point in women careers, because women nowadays are very well educated, are very hardworking, are very ambitious. Often they are perfectionists, and so this is a good basis we have. But of course, I also think we can be better in even more talking about our career ambitions, and even more proacting for asking for responsibility and power. And we can more do in our in carrying about our network. Good networks we need, everybody needs in business good networks. There we can spend, I think, more time. But we need other things. I think we need three things, especially in our sector, in the real estate sector. We see more men in leadership than we have women in leadership. So I would say we need men who take their female colleagues forward, who push them. And I would say every man who pushes, we see a lot around us that men like to push their male colleagues. And so I would like to say, please, every time when you push a male colleague, please also push a female colleague. This is one principle we should aim, yes. And what we also need is, in my eyes, we need men, but also women who understand their positions and their functions in the workplace as mentors. Mentors in workplace. And the third thing I think, and it's very essential, is the rethinking at the management levels in companies, so that they promote more mixed teams. We all know in the meantime that mixed teams are more innovative and more successful. And so I think this is something we have to ask the companies to do that.
Thank you. So if I can recap, that is actually men should be taking more of responsibility to support females within the company. There should be more females with mentors, either male or female. And also the management of the company should do more to support the females. A little later, I'm going to come to Dr. Muschter, so I'll be interested to hear, as CIO, what your opinion is on that. But one other angle that I'd like to ask Anna Bailly to answer is, if this is the role of the males and the females, which role can the company play in supporting the females? Is it the responsibility of a female to change and to do different things, or is it also the responsibility of a company?
Thank you very much, and that is exactly the third point that Cornelia Eisenbacher went to, which I believe must not be underestimated. First of all, I would like to say I'm in agreement with you. We will not have this discussion in 20 years. I do hope we will not have this discussion in 5 years or 10 years. I think, and I hope that we'll be faster than that, and we will not be sitting here needing to talk about the inequality in pay and in position between male and female professionals in our industry. However, I would be very, very careful in allocating the responsibility mainly to the individual. And that applies both to men and women, because people are different and not everybody is as outgoing and has the type of personality to really go forward and make it happen for themselves. That also applies to both male and female. And I agree with you that we must develop a culture that fosters empowerment of women, but it always takes two to make such a system work. And at the moment we have a system that works very well in inequality, and it is fed both by employers and by companies, as well as the recipients, the employees. And if we as an industry, if we as RICS want to help speed up that process, we must take the companies into responsibility and commit companies to what you said in your third point, to really make a point in establishing mixed teams. And I'm not saying prefer women, just take good care which talents in your company you see and you foster. And also to commit themselves to equal pay, that you pay work equally. At the moment in this country and in this industry, it is up to the individual to negotiate and negotiate well. We do have a market where certain individuals negotiate extraordinarily well, up to a level where no employer could elevate their entire staff to that level. That is why we have this inequality at the moment. So staff who have been in the company for very long stay at a completely different level than others coming in. And yes, it is more often the males who negotiate more aggressively and end up with higher salaries. So also this inequality doesn't only apply to women, maybe more often, but we must make the companies responsible for generating a culture and fostering a culture where equal treatment, equal pay and equal opportunities are happening.
So, Tina, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I would like to comment on that. I'm sorry, I'm speaking a bit out of turn, but I think when I'm hearing whose responsibility is it the women's responsibility? Is it the man's responsibility? Is it the company's responsibility, or even government? Where does it sit? And I think for me the real question is, what does one get out of it? And I don't think by saying it should be the man's responsibility, should be the woman's, etc., that we're going to get anywhere. I'm more worried about what is the impetus for a man to help a woman advance in business? And I think that impetus is there. Fortunately, I do think I have a solution to this. But I think that when it comes to the millennials and even the younger generations beyond the millennials, we're starting to get a very different relationship to work. and work and leisure and work and community and home life are seen very differently. And I think that one of the keys is that if, as the millennials are driving businesses to change their practices because they want to be able to have their activities after work. They want to be able to have more freedom. They want to use the technology to free up where they work, when they work. I think that is an absolutely positive key thing. If the men in companies want more freedom, more flexibility, then it goes in hand to say that women will be able to get the same. Mm-hmm. And I think the whole issue we've been having up until present has been that this has always been women driving the want and the need to work part-time, to have flexible workspace, working from home. And it's not a thing about gender. This is a question about the young men who are growing up into businesses. They as well suffer from certain stereotypes. Mm-hmm. They've been brought up to be, you shouldn't cry, you shouldn't show your emotions, you should always be strong, you should be the man in the house. And I think that the millennials and younger generations are actually reivindicating to be more emotional, more emotional intelligence. And I'm hoping that that's the solution, is that we get betterment for everyone. Mm-hmm. I think if everyone is looking for the same thing, maybe women will benefit from it. Mm-hmm. But I think alone, it's very difficult.
That's a very interesting perspective, and because we've been talking a lot about men and what men are doing and men's stereotypes, interesting, I'd like to draw Dr. Muschter into the conversation as CEO of Commerz Real. 19 locations, I believe, across Europe, 750 staff. And diversity is our strength, is the credo. So you live and breathe diversity, actually. Could you say a little bit about your secrets to success in embedding female diversity?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, you see that it's a very broad subject, and there are many components which are necessary. And we've talked about the person, we've talked about the company. We've not talked about in Germany, for example, the culture of the country. You see that at least in Western Germany, it's a lot more unusual for women to have children, career than it is in Eastern Germany. My wife, for example, she originates from Leipzig. Her mother has always worked. For my wife, it was absolutely clear that she will work, and there is a deep responsibility of my mother-in-law, for example, to help our careers to develop. She takes care of the kids, opposite to my parents, who always said, we are glad that you moved out of the house and now we have time for us and we will not take care of your children because we have had our duty. So I think we as a culture need to understand that it is very important for both men and women to have the possibility to work as much as they like. And it's also the freedom who decides he or she rather stays home. I think that's perfectly fine too. We shouldn't look for this one solution which works for everyone. I think the goal must be that people can do what they, for themselves or as a couple, what they decide is the best for the family and for the overall setup. As Commerz Real, for us, it's crystal clear that we, in the war for talents, you cannot exclude women in the first place. You see that in studies, in most of the universities, women are already have the majority. So it's crazy to say we exclude them from the market, and it's also crazy to exclude them from management and top management positions. So as a company, we need to procure that we have the flexibility in work models, in home office, in sharing of positions, 2 women sharing 1 top job, for example. We need to make sure that all this is in place, that women have the chance to have the family and to have the job. On the other hand, I think it's very important to explain the women that they need to articulate what they want to do. They need, first of all, to consider their own ambition. Do I really want to have a top job? And if they do want to have a top job, they need to speak to their boss, for example, to announce that openly, look for a mentor who helps them go through the different levels. That's often the problem, that they do not articulate what they want, and career management for male and female is also something you need to work on yourself. It's not that a company or whoever can manage your career, you need to work for that, and that applies for both. But then, yes, there needs to be, we have mentoring programs, for example, in particular for women, networking. We have an own women network in Commerz Real, where they meet in brown bag meetings together, networking cross-functionally. That's all very important. And yeah, we are convinced that it's, I think 5 years the latest, we don't need to talk about this anymore, because it's crystal clear that it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah. But you make a very interesting point that employers would also like to hear women articulate more about their needs and requirements, because this is exactly what Cornelia Eisenbacher was saying, that women need to do it. So actually both sides are saying, talk more, communicate, express what you need to happen to make you function as a successful employee. So I think this is one lesson that we all need to take away. Talk, discuss, approach your employer, say exactly what it needs, and you may find that your employer is more receptive to your needs, that there are no barriers at all. Taking another element, and I'd just like to revert back to Tina Paillet, who is the first female chair of RICS in Europe in its 25-year history. Now, RICS does an appointment system based on skills and competencies, and not on whether somebody is male or female. Having said that we know a lot of, certainly in Germany, that there is legislation for a minimum quota, 30%, and just recently, I think last week in California, they legislated for the first time the state that there would also be a minimum of females on boards. So maybe Tina, you get around Europe a lot with your work. How do you see female quotas? Do you think it's a good thing, or some people find it distasteful, or is it a positive thing as a stepping stone?
Very, very good question. I think the first, and maybe just a little funny anecdote, when I was giving some thought to this panel and what I would be asked and what I would say, I was speaking with my husband, and I said, well, apparently I'm the first woman chair of the RICS for Europe. And he looked at me and he said, really? And I said, well, that's what I just found out when I was looking at the questions that Judith was going to be asking. And I said, I never really thought of it that way. I didn't, propose myself thinking I'm going to be the first woman. And I think maybe that would have been a bit intimidating if it had been the case. And I think, and that sort of leads to this question about, well, how do we get more women in top positions? And is the quota the way to go, or is it not? And I have to say, it's a very, very difficult question. There's, as you said, Judith, pros and cons. You get placed, in some ways, women who might have been hired within a quota system may be discredited, may not be sufficiently supported because they're seen as sort of the token female on the board. I think my conclusion on the topic is that it's probably a necessary evil. I unfortunately do not agree that within 5 years, or maybe even 10 or 15, we will have finished with this topic and women and men will be completely equal. I think that's overly optimistic, and and I'm saying that in the position where I am. I just don't think that I don't see enough women. The women are there at the universities. You're absolutely right. In a lot of cases, women are qualified to the highest level at larger percentages than men are. But when they get into the working field, they fall away. And we do not see women progressing. Somewhere at middle management level, women fall away and men take the lead. And somewhere at middle management level, women's salaries do not progress. Part of that may be due to, and then they don't progress up to the top. So there's that glass ceiling that keeps women from going up there. And the question is why? And I've looked at a few studies whereby, the first reaction is, well, women have to take off. That's their childbearing years. They take off to raise a family and then have a hard time coming back into the business, or don't want to come back in because they've decided to take up family. That actually, in a Deloitte study that I read, turns out to be not the case for what's happening in Deloitte. Deloitte is losing middle managers, but not because they choose to raise their families, but because they choose not to come back to Deloitte in this particular instance, because of the way of this type of work and the work environment that they do not feel is conducive to leading a well-balanced life. And therefore, obviously Deloitte looked at the study and has been doing all sorts of things to change that. And I can only commend, that sort of movement. But I think that the question of why do women not get to the top and do we need quotas to get them there is probably linked in this, what happens to women as they progress in their careers. And I do think that bringing in role models at top level, having women as top managers and top CEOs of groups and companies is a very, very strong way and strong message to get more women interested in the field, willing to go into a field that has been seen as very male-dominated in the past, as you were saying, Judith. And I think it's an absolute, as I say, it's a necessary evil. I think we need it. I think we need it. I may be talking a bit strongly.
It's another perspective, and I think every perspective is very interesting at this position, at this point in time. So I think what was interesting is that at the end, you touched on more role models, which really means more visibility for women.
Yeah.
And our CEO, for example, at RICS, has said before he's invited onto a panel to discuss anything, he will first of all check how many females are sat on the panel, and if there are not enough, he as CEO will not join that panel. That is his pledge to visibility, which is one small step that maybe, and Dr. Muschter, I'm glad that you've accepted.
Same for me, yeah. I only go on panels where exclusively women are, and I'm the only man.
And to continue the theme of visibility, a question to Cornelia Eisenbacher as chair of Frauen in der Immobilien-Wirtschaft, Women in Property in Germany. Female networks are probably a great means of increasing visibility. Women talking to other women, sharing best practice. Have you any views on this? How networks can be used?
Yes, let's say this is the spirit of our community, Frauen in der Immobilien-Wirtschaft, is this networking thinking that we meet. For example, in our 12 regions we are organized with our around about 1,000 members that we meet for over a year. For more than 200 events we organize, inspections of current real estate properties, of presentations of, for example, legal items or current legal issues. We organize business speed datings, and other networking events, especially to enable to get to know to each other and to learn to understand each other more, and at the end, of course, to make business with each other. That's the main target of our community. And the figures also of the members we have over the last years show that we are on a right way. That this is the demand.
It's interesting. So meeting to connect, to network, share best practice.
To learn also about new things. Yes, of course. It's a mixture between knowledge, expert knowledge, get more expert knowledge, but also training, let's say, more the communication and integration, and also also these things. Yes,
and also to do business.
And
which
also to do business.
I'd like to put the question to Bailly, who worked previously for Savills for over 5 years, and then Anna left and has been her own self-employed for a couple of years. So I can imagine raising visibility is even more important when you are self-employed, because you need that business.
Well, I suppose anybody, regardless of whether it's a male or a female, will have that experience once you start your own company and start it on your own as well. So absolutely, networking is a necessity. I've also attended several events of Frauen in der Immobilien-Wirtschaft in Hamburg. And I'm not a member. And in my personal opinion, it's just the fact that this network exists and continues to grow. It already shows the issue that we're having in this industry. Yeah, we don't have pure male communities to say, okay, let's just meet without the women. So it goes to show what problem we still have, and which we will continue to work on. And I understand it is totally helpful to have an environment where you can exchange knowledge, and your events are they always have an educational factor, and there's a lot of exchange. There are a lot of leaders that I encounter, a lot of women in upper positions, a lot of women who run their own businesses. So it's very, very inspiring. And the network shows, obviously, we have a necessity to still work on the equality issue. So maybe if in 5, 10 or 20 years we will not have the issue of inequality anymore, the necessity to meet with women alone, it might not disappear, and I totally appreciate it's a different sort of interaction, but it will not have this huge need in our industry anymore. My personal experience is that of course, I go out and I use networks. I use RICS a lot. I co-lead the regional group in northern Germany as well. But it is totally helpful as a young entrepreneur to go out and present yourself and talk to people. And also, where I come back to your point number 1, which you made initially when we started this discussion, what kind of perception do I have of myself and my role? What kind of perception do I want others to gain of me? So yes, of course, women who decide, people who decide to go ahead with their own company often also have that trait of character to present themselves, which I try to do a lot. I also say we are not the majority. The majority of women in this industry are not running their own business, they are not in a leadership position yet, and not all of them might have that trait of character. So I want to come back to the point, what can we do as an organization, as an industry, as a company to help this process along?
Okay, thank you. Quick question to the audience. Who is a member of a network, female or otherwise? Oh, that's good. It's not bad. Well, this is the lady you need to speak to if you're working in Germany, and if you're working elsewhere, there's many networks for women in property, so inform yourself. You've heard of the benefits, increase visibility, very, very important. And I'd like to come back to Dr. Muschter, because very interestingly, you also started the conversation with your comments about culture, and how the culture, the background of the person can influence also the decisions they make. Gender equality is also about process, structure, culture, and as the company becomes more and more digital, is there an opportunity to impact on culture and how within the organisation these stereotypes that Tina talked about, male or female, can be broken down?
Absolutely. First of all, I'm hoping that this hierarchy we used to have throughout decades will cease to exist. This top management, middle management, specialist. We want to go and work in agile teams where you have individual subjects where you focus on, and there's just a project leader who is taking care of it, and that can be at one point a man, at another point a woman, just who has the time at that or who has the skill set at that for that purpose you're after. And I think this you need to have. I mean, I'm very fond of networking. I think mentoring is very important, but not to say you need someone to pull you through hierarchies, rather to guide you. What is the skill set you need to have to be attractive in the next decades? We all have to focus on our skill set. We have to learn a lot for the next decades, because what we have learned in the past will not be enough to be successful in the future. That's absolutely clear. Digitization is a very important subject there. We are competing against artificial intelligence, and we don't need to compete, because what human beings have is a lot more than just automation and algorithms. It's being intuitive, being innovative. In particular, many studies now say that women are clearly in advantage because they have a skill set which will be a lot more helpful in the future than it has been in the past, because digitization leads to human skills which obviously women might have even more than men have. So what I'm saying, as a company, we need to procure that we have successful teams and that we have the best people working together. They need to be diverse, they need to be agile, they need to be new, and so in my ideal world, it's not a question of man or female, but it's always the question, who is the appropriate person for the task you have on the table. That's our goal, and that's what we work on.
Yeah. Not a question male or female. I think that's a very, very important statement, that everybody has equal opportunities. And I'm going to ask the panel to make a final statement in a couple of minutes, because unfortunately we're running out of time. But first of all, I'd like to ask the audience, have you any questions? The question is, how important is government policy to achieving gender parity? Would anybody like to
legally
take it?
to have
Legally and policy.
Yeah. Well, hopefully as a company you don't need actually the government to tell you what are the best employees for your company. I'm not a big fan of
quotas.
I have to admit, and I think it's neither for men nor for women really necessary to do that.
I think there's something really important that I was listening to just yesterday. Christine Lagarde, the president of the IMF, had a study done on government policies, and she said that she was flabbergasted to find out that of all of the countries that are regulated by the IMF, and we're talking about several hundred, 90%, 90, have in their legislation, in their law, have prejudicial acts against women. And not small ones, things about ownership, things that will change the way a woman can benefit from her life and what she wants to do. And I think your question is key. I think if at the base of our legislative system we have prejudices against women and what they can do and what they can own, and whether they can vote, and whether they can, have a hypothec on their real estate. I mean, major things like that. That's key to where later companies will pick up.
Thank you. The comment made by this lady refers to an initiative in the UK whereby there is a move to make parental leave equal between men and women, which in effect would encourage employers to treat both groups equally because they know that the possibility of men taking parental leave could equally be as high as women taking parental leave. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah. So,
It's a small initiative.
yes, it's a small, but it's a start. It's a start. It's a start. Thank you. Anna, what do you?
You're probably the only one in this round who's not a parent, but it's a very, very important point. And Tina said earlier, their studies show it is not the parental leave which is the problem. I appreciate that at the moment women in this country, for instance, they usually take a year, and men have now, as of recent, started to take a month or two. Anything beyond that is damaging to their career. I appreciate that we have this issue. However, the parental leave to employers is not the problem. The problem is that women, after their parental leave or after a second child, opt not to come back. And why don't they? Because we have very, very conservative structures in this industry. This industry is to a very, very large extent dominated by office workplaces where you can do either full-time, which is 8:30 till open end, who leaves first loses, or you can do part-time, which will prevent you from advancing into top positions, or you stay away. Those are the three options we have. And the majority of companies, when we speak about digitalization, which we have been doing for years, so the first notion was everybody gets an iPhone, we're very digital, because now I can reach you when you're not here. And the next step was, okay, to allow for 1 day at the home office. That will do as far as flexibility of work is concerned. And I tell you, it does not do. It will prevent talents, women, the Generation Y, the Generation Z, the high performers from entering this industry because they find more attractive ways of developing, of working, of applying their skills in other branches and industry. And we're right back to our war for talents. And that is what we have to look at, probably starting with issues like parental leave, but we must go much, much further than this if we want gender equality, if we want to win the war for talents, if we want those performers in our industry and in leading positions.
So I'm afraid I'm going to ask everybody for a quick closing statement, and then I'm afraid we will have to finish here. May I start with you, Dr. Muschter?
Well, I think we've touched at least the major issues. We see that there's lots of work to do for all of us. I think the good news is everyone here seems to agree that diversity is so important to be successful, and there are so many studies who prove that, how high-performing teams are put together, set together, and there needs to be an equal amount of men, women, skilled people, and so no doubt that we're on the right track, and let's keep on working.
Thank you. Thank you. Tina?
I'd like to say that I think in these times of change, in these times of immense unknown, where there's a need for innovation, there is a need for creativity, I think that diversity is the absolute most important element to avoid groupthink. And groupthink is the problem we have in a lot of our businesses in real estate, whereby you have a board which is all above 50 white male decision makers. And I think diversity is the key to making sure that our industry prevails in these times of change.
Thank you, Tina. Very, very good point. Anna?
I absolutely agree with Tina. Diversity is the key. So the plea to the industry is to foster a culture of diversity and inclusion. And gender equality will come along with that automatically. And to achieve that and to get the best employees we can get for this industry, my personal plea is consider more flexible work environments, both in quantity as well as location. It is possible in our age of digitalization, and this might be the key to win and to keep people and to encourage people to come back after taking a break and contribute to this industry also in leading positions.
Thank you. Cornelia Eisenbacher.
I will end with Mr. Muscher's first words of this round. It's a lot to do. It's a lot to do, and I think we have to focus on also on this what we discussed now. This phase of life-oriented working situation conditions. We have to offer life learning ideas, and we have to think about, that's a main point also of mine, we have to think about new recruitment procedures. Perhaps we come to blind recruitment procedures, so that nobody can see whether it is a man or a woman. Perhaps that's the future.
There's so much to say, there's so much to do. I think we could have carried on, but Richard has we must stop here. I think what my takeaways is, whether it's the female quota, different views on that, is that recruitment policies are also key, that actually we shouldn't always be differentiating between men and women. It will be the norm if everybody had the same opportunities. And while there are slight differences of opinion whether we will stop talking about this in 5 years or 8 years or 20 years, I think the key takeaway is that we continue collectively, individually, we do whatever we can to achieve step by step this change, which ultimately may mean that we close the gap and achieve it quicker than we anticipated. So I'd like to thank you all for being a fantastic audience, but most of all I'd like to thank my panel. You've been absolutely fantastic.